Kansas City for sure. Yeah, yeah. Be wondering. Well, it's great to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
Oh, not a problem.
So before we get into your work, I want to know 4 years ago we were trying to figure this pandemic out.
Mhm.
How did you get through the pandemic and how did it ultimately change the way that you do business now?
Well, right before the pandemic, I started my virtual CFO company. So I do both virtual CFO and forensic accounting. And so I started it in May of 19. And ironically enough, and maybe this won't come as a shock, at the time, attorneys had no clue how to do video chats. I mean, absolutely none. You try to set it up, and they were like scratching their heads, and then they just do a phone call. It's like, okay, fine. Um, and I had that problem with some of my other CFO clients was, just everything virtually. They couldn't do it. And then the pandemic hit, and then everybody's using Zoom and GoToMeeting and Microsoft Teams and all that. And it helped my business tremendously from that aspect. Now, the other aspect, I'm building up because I'm virtual. I have to build up my SEO and all that stuff. But because everybody was kind of forced into, using video chat and video calls and all that, it actually helped my business tremendously. And also, people became more accepting of a remote accountant, if that makes sense,
Yeah.
because usually it's like, no, we want, Susie or somebody, sitting right there, at their desk. We don't, want to do somebody remote. And then they start realizing they can do this remote, because it's the accounting world is literally just numbers. So,
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I think the world did grasp that whole virtual aspect of it, that things could be done that way, which is refreshing.
right.
Um, so let's get to the heart and soul of your life and numbers and being an entrepreneur. If I put you in front of a bunch of third graders, it's career day. One of the kids says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer them?
To third graders, I would say I look at different companies' accounting records, look at their books, and I help them make more money with their respective company. I show them, where they can make more money with a product, how they can bring in more cash into their business. From that aspect, from the forensic aspect, I go and I investigate people who stole money and figure out what they did with it.
Gotcha. So what did you want to be in the third grade? What was your dream?
I don't recall. It changed frequently because I think at one point I wanted to play football, but God didn't bless me with weight, so that didn't happen. Um, and then I think I wanted to be like an FBI agent at one point in time, and then it just changed, periodically. I was always I grew up out in the country, so some of the options, and granted, when I was in third grade, that was 1983, so internet didn't exist either. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, how did this love of numbers happen? Take me back to where you were born and raised and how this was cultivated into you, not only loving numbers, but getting into being an entrepreneur and having your own business.
so it so my father was born during the Depression, and up in the Minnesota area. And a lot of times, during that time, you had to build everything yourself. And so he ended up becoming a carpenter, and he actually made it up to more or less a carpenter teacher. He was teaching people how to do carpentry. And growing up on a farm, he built everything. He built our house, he built our barn, everything. And so I was always around numbers constantly. He would measure something and see that. So I was constantly around it. However, I did not inherit his skill to be able to cut straight. And so I love carpentry, but I can't cut straight to save my life. So I was like, I got to find a different profession because nobody's going to hire me to build their house. And so then I ended up migrating towards accounting when I went to college. And I was like, you know what, this all makes sense to me. And so that's kind of, I started progressing that. And from college, I went into public accounting, and I was in that for about 20 years. And as I was in public accounting, I made my way up to an audit partner, and I was actually the director of audit for this 100-person firm. And I saw the need out there for the small and medium businesses to have kind of the expert level help. They don't need somebody to sit there 40 hours a week in their office. They just need 10, 20 hours a week to help them understand their financials, understand cash flow, understand gross profit. They need kind of that level, but they don't need somebody sitting there constantly. And so that kind of spurred in my mind. And then also I've got four children, and I was constantly on the road working 70, 80-hour weeks. And I was like, I can't keep doing this. And so that's ended up, developing my own company, being virtual, being remote. And so it kind of just went hand in hand. Is like, there are people out there that do need help, financial expert help. They don't need somebody there, full time. And I can then also be with my kids, so like, my oldest daughter does competitive soccer. In my previous business or in my previous firm, there's no way I would have been able to go to all their games and practices. Now I can, type situation. So that kind of also spurred that entrepreneurial side, is also to be able to spend more time with my family.
So, who's been a hero or an inspiration for you in your professional life?
Um, I It kind of varies, really. It's just anybody I've seen who took a risk and went out and built their business, and understanding how that business worked, and then being humble with that. There's one gentleman here in the area I have, he owns several franchise restaurants, but he started as literally, a clerk behind the counter, when he very first started, and then he built up and ended up buying some of the restaurants. And but he's always been very humble about it, type situation. So that I think those type individuals, I truly appreciate, because I've been through that, and you've had those months where it's like, okay, how am I going to pay for all this, type situation, and expand and all that type situation. So but yeah, it tends to be more the small and medium business person who toughed it out, understood what was going on, you know eventually became successful, but they're still humble about where they started.
So, if you can meet anybody alive on the planet right now that you find fascinating or inspirational and spend a little time with them, who would that be?
um if they were still alive, this may sound odd, but Nikolai Tesla, I
Yeah,
think that would just be, obviously got a language barrier, but just how he just went, no, he was like, no, I'm going to go invent this, and I'm going to go invent that type situation. It would just be fascinating just to talk to him and see how his mind worked, and how he was focused on his projects, not necessarily, what everybody else was saying.
yeah.
And that kind of comes true with, when you develop a business, is you focus on your business. There's going to be naysayers out there all the time. Say, oh, you can't do that. You're going to have to go back to work in the corporate world, like, all that. And it's like, being focused on what you want and controlling what you want. Um, I think the other one um, would be Stephen Covey. He would be a very interesting person, the one who wrote Seven Habits. I use that pretty much daily. I
Yeah.
mean, I literally have, obviously, I don't know if your viewers can say, but I literally have a list that I write every single day as to what I need to get done today, what I need to get done this week, this month, type situation. So everything he brought to, just those books has been very powerful for me to help me manage, because I've got a lot of clients and a lot of stuff going on. So, and then understanding what are the big rocks and what are the things that needs done, but not right now type situation.
Yeah. So, what is your motivation every day to do the work that you do? Not only to help others get to a better place, but to evolve yourself as a person. What is that daily gas in your tank?
Um, I think one, there was a comment from my previous firm that it was, I'll have to allude to, it was kind of like, oh, well, that won't work. You'll be back here. So that's always that motivating factor, is yes, it will work. Um, Type surgery, because I had actually proposed these services to my previous firm, and they kind of shot it down. So, but that's just kind of that's the little, pin in my side. Um, but I really do enjoy, especially when I get a new client, going through and helping them figure out, okay, here's everything that's in your financial statements that we need to fix first. Now that we fix that, now let's do our budget. Now let's see truly where we can go. And then I kind of help them, kind of manage going through that. I love doing that. I love teaching. And I don't have a PhD, so I can't go to the local college and teach. Um, but I love to teach them kind of what's happening with their books, how to fix it, how to look at, their financials differently. I've always really enjoyed doing that.
So, what's been one of your favorite client success stories so far?
My favorite one was, it was a manufacturing client. They had been around for 30 some years. Owner had just purchased the company from, the more or less the founders. And really, the first day that I sat down and met with them, I said, okay, can I see your budget for the last year? Because I need to, put together budgets, forecast. And there was that blank stare at me. And that's when I realized they'd never done a budget. I was like, okay, well, 90% of the companies out there don't, small companies don't do budgets. So, okay, let's get this going. And then we started going into, because they sell different products and what was their gross margin on their products. Well, the way they were calculating their margin was sales less materials. They weren't including labor, overhead, anything. And I'm like, no, 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 that's not your margin. And so then when we started building in the labor and overhead, they started saying, oh, we shouldn't be selling these products. We're actually losing money on these products. So slowly over like a 3-year period, we went from they were more or less break even, maybe a small loss, to back in the end of 2023, I think there were almost 1.2 million, probably more, in net income. And so it was that exercise of, first we're going to start with a budget, then we're going to break down by department, then we break it down by product, and then we started analyzing their costs. What costs could they control, what they couldn't, what products really they should stop selling, what they should focus on. And just through that process, they've now become a very profitable company. So I think that's my favorite one. But again, going back to the budget, almost every client that we bring on, I always ask them if there's a budget, and of course 99% of the time there isn't. And so
Yeah.
we start with, say, okay, it's kind of like that saying, I forget who said it. Um, if a number can be measured, it can be managed.
Yeah.
And then I kind of go through that process with them. It's like, okay, first we're going to measure where you want to be, so that then we can manage to get you there. Or if you're not getting there, how do we kind of divert the ship to get you back there?
So of all of the things that you've done and become in your life, what are you the proudest of?
My wife and my kids.
Yeah.
I mean, work is, it helps support it, but I mean, in the end, when you get through your life, it's the wife and kids, and just how seeing them grow, all those experiences and the time with them. I wish I would have started this company sooner,
Yeah.
to be able to spend more time, because my oldest is now going into college. He's going to be an engineer. Um, but luckily I've got 4, and the youngest is just out of kindergarten. So I've got a big gap here.
Yeah.
um, so I get to spend time with them. And like I said, I wish I would have done this sooner. Um, but again, it is what it is. But being able to spend time with them and my wife and be able to see them, because when I was in public accounting, like I said, I was working 70, 80-hour weeks, wouldn't see them, maybe see them a little bit on Sunday, and then right back at it. And it was like, to me, that was no way I wanted to live. So,
Yeah. So let me ask you this. If you had a dream tonight and ran into the 18-year-old version of you and you could give that young version of you a piece of advice based on the wisdom you've gained in your life up to this point, what advice would you give that young version of you?
I would, and I believe Stephen Covey's book may have been out at that point in time. I think it was. I would say, first read this book, and then read it again, and then read it again, um, and then point myself to, okay, this is the profession you want to go into, but you don't have to. I think, unfortunately, with a lot of kids, and like my son, he wants to be an aeronautical engineer, and it's like, well, you can do other parts of engineering. You don't just have to do that. Just so I understood, because my other thought that I had was I would have loved to go into chemistry. For some reason, that fascinated me. But just to tell my 18-year-old self, hey, go ahead. First, organize everything, because as an 18-year-old, you have nothing organized. You
Yeah.
think you do, but you don't.
Yeah.
Um, but then understand the process, and then what is the most important thing in your life. I think
Yeah.
the 18, that's hard. When you get into your late 20s, early 30s, you start to understand what the most important thing is, but start to highlight, what is truly the most important thing in your life, and understand that as you're going through the process.
What's the best advice you've ever gotten?
um I think it is just kind of cliche, but don't give up,
Yeah.
type situation. It's it kind of lends into, if you don't manage your life, somebody else will manage it for you. Type, and I've heard that saying before. And so a lot of times I kind of go back to that thought. It's like, okay, wait a minute, am I managing this, or am I not doing anything and now somebody's managing it for me, type situation. So it's kind of that hand in hand of, don't give up, but also manage your own life. Otherwise, somebody will manage it for you.
So let's say we get off this call and a time machine pulls up, and you can go anywhere in the history of human time and see one event with your own eyes, or you could go into the future. Where would you go?
Library of Alexandria.
Yeah,
Prior to obviously it burning down.
yeah,
Um, and one caveat: be able to read, the text, because
yeah,
obviously I'm not. I probably wouldn't be able to read, but that I would love to go through that and see what kind of documents were there, and what the places. And so, if I only had one, that would be it, because that would be, as far as I know, the historical knowledge at that point in time was located there.
yeah. So, Steve, at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, but you run the show. What's
Mhm.
your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Uh, my perception is somebody who is fair and reasonable on how I interact with people, and I tend to be calm on my actions. Um, Given kind of my background, I tend not to put emotions into decisions, and again, that's part and parcel to being a forensic accountant. But just trying to be more of a logical thinker, calm, logical as to a situation.
So, if anyone wants to hire you, reach out, learn more about what you're doing, any of the good business, where can they go?
They can go to delegatecfo.com, and then figure out which services they need, whether it's a virtual CFO, virtual controller, forensic, or a accounting manager. If they do need forensic side, that would be my hovlandforensic.com. And then again, that forensic side is for investigations and expert witness.
Okay. Steve, this has been wonderful. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your story. Thank you for your time.
Well, thank you.
Yes.